Many Magic the Gathering players ask the question, is it worth it to buy a Lorwyn Eclipsed theme deck for Standard? Yes, Standard. Alongside the release of Lorwyn Eclipsed, Wizards of the Coast has designed a pair of 60-card pre-constructed theme decks built around two Magic the Gathering creature types, with admittedly little connection to the plane of Lorwyn: Angels and Pirates, the classic fantasy feud. These casual decks are intended to introduce new players to the Standard format and feature cards from many of the current Standard legal sets, including a few cards from Lorwyn Eclipsed itself. Not since Challenger decks were quietly discontinued in 2022 have we seen Standard legal precons. But do these decks have much or any relation to their Challenger predecessors? Is there any value in them, or did Wizards just fill a cardboard box with draft chaff and market it as a Standard precon? How well designed are these decks, and how well do they play against each other? And perhaps most importantly, are these decks something that you can bring to Friday Night Magic to play Standard with at your local game store? And if they aren't, spoilers, they aren't, what would you need to do to get them there? All these questions and more are what's in store, so let's take a look. Excuse me, if I could just interrupt your Lorwyn content for a moment? Oh no, not more universes beyond in my Lorwyn product. Are you like a Ninja Turtle or something? Not quite. I'm from Vault 1993, and it looks like a real wasteland out here. Tell me about it. There's only 2 more in-universe sets for the rest of the year, and Gran is dominating Standard. Well, that still sounds better than New Vegas. Everything here is controlled by a technocrat who loves his artificial intelligence systems a little too much, if you know what I mean. Yeah, we got a guy who does that too. It's rough. I can't get any work. I used to clear out death claws by the quarry, but that got automated by Securitrons, and the last time I worked as a courier for the Great Khans, I ended up on a crucifix. Well, I hear there's a settlement that needs your help. Oh my god, again? No more. It's not even worth the caps. I get it, times are tough, but maybe you should try a new playthrough as someone with special computer skills. Computer skills? Who needs that? If you fail your first 2 hack attempts, just exit the terminal or save scum. Yeah, well, unfortunately there's no way to save scum in the economy that is 2026. But leveling up in skills of Python, SQL, and Go is so easy you don't even need high points in intelligence. That's because boot.dev teaches back-end web development and programming, and those are skills that apply to software developer jobs. War never changes. But if I were a software developer, my salary sure would. With that kind of job, you could buy your own Nuka-Cola vending machine. Boot.dev is fun and easy, where you earn experience, level up, unlock achievements, and complete quests while learning to code. And unlike Fallout 76, everybody doesn't dislike boot.dev. Yeah, we don't talk about Fallout 76. My bad. If you want to start a good RPG with real rewards, you can use my code and get 25% off your first year. Just follow the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get started on boot.dev today. Now that's a zero combat build I can get behind. Thank you, boot.dev, for sponsoring this video, and thank God you are not a Ninja Turtle. A Lorwyn Eclipsed theme deck contains the following. 1 ready-to-play out-of-the-box 60-card deck consisting entirely of non-foil cards from several different Standard legal sets. 5 double-sided token cards, a somewhat flimsy cardboard deck box, what is generously described as a strategy insert, and a reference card to let you know turn phases and information about a few of Magic's most popular formats. Price? Well, the MSRP of a theme deck is $23.99, which, as of the recording of this video, is also about what they're going for on the secondary market. On its face, that's not a bad price relative to what most products like this cost these days. The MSRP for Commander Precons is twice that, for instance. And for comparison, the 75-card Challenger decks had an MSRP of $29.99 back when they were released, while for further comparison, the now ancient Duel decks had an MSRP MSRP of $19.99, though keep in mind with dual decks, they contained 2 60-card decks, so that was actually quite a value back in the day. The theme decks for Lorwyn Eclipsed are designed to be played against other 60-card theme decks, a phrasing which implies there are more of these theme decks on the horizon. As of right now, though, Angels and Pirates are the only 2 standard legal theme decks you can buy, which makes them effectively equivalent to dual decks. But unlike the dual decks we once got, a product line I loved, by the way, Angels and Pirates are a pair of dual decks sold separately. So each deck alone costs $5 more than what a pair of dual decks once cost together. Granted, you can buy the 2 Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks together on the secondary market for a reduced price. Most vendors are selling the pair of decks at a bulk price of $45, which saves you about $5 from buying the 2 decks separately. But that's still $25 more than you once had to spend on a pair of dual decks, which honestly weren't discontinued that long ago. Even though these theme decks are functionally dual decks, there are some differences in deck construction. Dual decks primarily consisted of 1 and 2 ofs, rarely any 3 ofs, and never playsets of any cards. They were also never standard legal. Dual decks were designed to play against each other, though you could also battle them against other dual decks. The Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks, on the other hand, feature multiple playsets of 4 cards at the low end of the curve. There are very few one-offs in either deck list, 1 in Pirates and 3 in Angels. In other words, these decks are designed to imitate a more traditional 60-card constructed deck. The construction of these decks is therefore more akin to the standard Challenger decks from nearly half a decade ago. Challenger decks, though, were designed to mimic existing standard archetypes from their time, and were intended to be brought to Friday Night Magic. Crucially, that meant they came with 15-card sideboards, something a deck absolutely needs for best-of-3 standard play. These Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks do not come with sideboards of any kind. There is also no meta in standard built around either Angels or Pirates, a key difference from the Challenger decks. But let's save any further analysis of these decks' Friday Night Magic viability for later in the video. For now, I'd like to ask, what kind of value can you expect in one of these theme decks, and how does that compare to their MSRP? As we enter the financial analysis section, keep in mind that Challenger decks, with their $30 MSRP, tended to have at least $30 of value above their MSRP, and some had as much as $70. If you were to buy the cheapest non-foil printing of all the singles from the Angels deck separately, you would have to spend $35.95, giving the precon a surplus value of just $10 relative to MSRP. If you only wanted to buy the singles worth $1 or more, you'd have to spend $27.97. I mentioned that Angels is not an established archetype within the standard metagame. As a result, most of the value contained in this precon stems from the card's commander viability, which is particularly awkward given you're getting multiple copies of many staples that really only have a home in a singleton format. The 2 copies of Lyra Dawnbringer and the 3 of Exemplar of Light, which cost $3.29 and $3.88 per copy respectively, make up the majority of this deck's value. Of the 44 cards in the Angels deck list that aren't basic lands, just 14 see any meaningful play in Standard as of the time of this video's recording. They are the 2 copies of Right's End, which are worth 9 cents each, the playset of Llanowar Elves, which are worth 19 cents each, the playset of Starfield Shepherd, which are worth about a quarter each, 2 copies of Split Up, a $1.79 card, 1 copy of Paw Patch Recruit worth $1.80, and 1 copy of Get Lost worth $4.07. So if we look at the total value of only the standard relevant singles here, it's only $11.35, which is half of the deck's MSRP. There are a few other cards, such as Exemplar of Light, which see some play in fringe archetypes, but by and large, these 14 cards are the most useful ones included in the deck list if your goal is to start playing Standard. In other words, less than a third of the cards that you're buying in this standard legal pre-constructed deck are actually meaningful cards in Standard, at least as of the time of this video's release. 3 more, Chomping Changeling and Personify, are new cards from Lorwyn Eclipsed that could prove Standard relevant, but these are also draft chaff. Neither card costs more than 50 cents per copy. That's not to say the other cards in the deck aren't relevant to the deck itself, just that if you were planning to buy this deck to pillage for building a more meta standard deck, you'd be better off just buying the relevant cards on their own for their cheapest printings. Moving on to the other deck, the pirates must be hiding their loot because this theme deck totals to a measly $12.17. Yes, that's the total of all the singles in this deck, and it's less than half what you'd have to pay to buy the precon. That's absolutely abysmal. Spoilers, this one's a fail, but let's keep looking. The only cards in the deck that crack the $1 threshold are the 3 copies of Inti, Seneschal of the Sun, which cost $1.09 a piece. Ironically, there are actually more cards with standalone relevancy for the standard metagame in the Pirates deck than in the Angels one. They just don't have any value. There's a playset of Burst Lightning, which does see standard play, but those are 9 cents each. A couple Broadside Barrage, 18-cent cards. 3 copies of Subterranean Schooner, 22 cents each. A playset of Spyglass Siren, 30 cents each. 2 copies of Spell Snare, nice, 50 cents each. A playset of the Marauding Mako, 57 cents each, and that Inti for $1.09. Yeah, there's 3 copies. So 22 of the 44 cards that aren't basic lands have standard relevancy as of the time of this recording. That's exactly half. But the total cost to just buy these cards is $9.13, which is still less value than the standard relevant singles in the Angels precon. There's no way around it. The value in these theme decks is awful. I'm honestly astounded at how financially worthless these products are, especially the Pirates precon. No, Wizards of the Coast doesn't set the price of singles on the secondary market, but come on, they're really selling $12 worth of cards for $25? That is a truly terrible deal, even by current standards. The Pirate deck is frankly inexcusable. Izzet has been the most powerful color combination in Standard for over a calendar year at this point, with plenty of expensive format staples within the color pair. Where are any of those staples within this deck list? Where is Into the Floodmaw, a $5 uncommon? That could have been in here. Where is Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, a fantastic card in and of itself that also happens to be a pirate that would synergize nicely with this deck? The mana bases on these decks are also terrible. I don't care that this is a product designed for beginners. Do beginners not deserve fast lands? Do they not deserve verges? Not even a single shock land? The problem is that the mana in Standard is all too expensive. They're not going to put verges in these decks because verges are one of the things pushing players to buy packs of Aetherdrift and Duskmourn. Shocklands are out of the question for a similar reason. But just look at these prices. If they had reprinted some of these lands in these theme decks, then the prices would have decreased and therefore the affordability of playing Standard would have increased. But these cards are left expensive because, you need a reason to buy packs. If this was a year ago, maybe we'd receive fast lands and pain lands, but it's not a year ago, and the pain lands are no longer in Standard, and only one of the 2 decks has access to a standard legal fast land, Spire Bluff Canal. So what lands do we get instead? Gain lands, utterly unplayable in constructed formats. From a financial perspective, hardly worth the cardboard that they're printed on. Let's compare these decks to the Challenger decks of the past. Now, the Challenger decks suffered from a noticeable decline in quality over the years. The first ones in 2018 were outstanding products. In my evaluation as a product reviewer, they were some of the best products ever made. But by the time we got down to 2022, Challenger decks were merely good. But even that last set of Challenger decks had mana bases that included slow lands, creature lands, even a couple pathways in some of them. And the mono-white Challenger deck, which could easily have had just a pile of ordinary basics, came with 20 snow-covered plains and 3 faceless havens. Snow-covered basics cost actual money, especially back then. It wasn't just mana bases either. The Challenger decks weren't perfect, but they were chock full of standard staples. They had clear and straightforward upgrade paths to become genuine meta decks. Heck, more than one of them over the years were just carbon copies of meta decks. Wizards of the Coast claims that these Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks are quote-unquote firmly above where we aimed lower-priced decks in the past. But frankly, looking at the financial value included, I have no idea what they are talking about. These have, and I'm being honest here, some of the worst value we've seen in a pre-constructed deck. But okay, look, financial value is not everything. These are playing cards, not stock options. If these decks are well designed from a gameplay standpoint, if they can play well against each other, or better yet, can be brought to Friday Night Magic or at least upgraded into something that you could bring to Friday Night Magic, then I'll begrudgingly forgive the financial shortcomings. So let's see how they play. The Angels deck is a snowballing mid-range deck in green and white. Your early game is spent getting your mana online with Llanowar Elves, Giada, Font of Hope, and Warped Starfield Shepherds. From turn 3 onward, you'll be spending as much mana as you can every turn, casting your big angels. In the late game, Exemplar of Light provides card advantage whenever you give it a counter or gain life. Lyra Dawnbringer turns a wide board of angels into a devastating life total swing, and with several pieces of interaction, including 2 copies of the flexible board wipe Split Up, you should have no trouble surviving long enough to make it to that late game. Starfield Shepherd is a powerful utility piece, fetching you up either a basic plains or one of your 3 different 1-mana creature options. There's also a mini combo with the Shepherd and a new card in the deck list. With 4 mana in play, you can warp the Shepherd for 2, then blink it with Personify, bringing it back to the battlefield to trigger its Enters clause again, while also preventing it from getting warped back into exile at the end of turn. For all my critiques of this product from a financial value perspective, I actually believe this Angels deck is a reasonably constructed casual deck. Most of the numbers make sense, the game plan is clear and straightforward while still being the kind of thing that will capture the imagination of a new player. No, this deck is nowhere close to powerful enough to compete at a Friday Night Magic, but it does seem like something a new player would enjoy pitting against other decks of similar power levels. Let's move on to the Pirates deck. We already know that it has bupkis in terms of value, but how does it play? The Pirates deck is an aggressive blue and red deck that hits hard and fast, churning through cards and applying pressure to your opponent's life total through board presence. The Pirates' mana curve is low, but the little creatures get bigger quick. Marauding Mako and Scrounging Skyray both get bigger whenever you discard cards, which is often. Meanwhile, the several vehicles in the deck list provide an alternative source of damage and board presence. Subterranean Schooner is a sturdy little vessel that offers card selection whenever it attacks. Seneschal of the Sun is a house, providing you with extra power, card advantage, and a means of pushing your larger ground creatures through blockers by providing trample. He's a tricky card to play with, though, for a beginner product. You have to be mindful of when it's right to discard a card to his ability versus decline his trigger. Inti's initial attack is at its best when you still have a land drop left to make, so that if you exile a land to his discard ability, you can play that for turn instead of one in your hand. Personally, even though Inti is a very powerful card and certainly synergizes with the discard theme of the deck, I would not have included him in a product intended for beginners. This is one of the most complicated sources of card advantage in Standard right now. He requires at least an intermediate level of card evaluation and a strong grasp of turn sequencing to get the most out of him. And there were plenty of simpler options among the Pirates in Standard, such as Malcolm, as I mentioned earlier, as well as cards like Breach's Eager Pillager. Played against each other, the Angels deck has a significant advantage. Its creatures are more powerful on their own than the Pirates deck, and its removal is more potent. Particularly, the inclusion of the 2 Split Up makes life really difficult for the Pirates player. What's more, the Angels deck is much easier to play. The Pirates deck has a lot of small decisions to make. Which creature should crew my vehicle? Should I leave this non-land on top of my library with my Explore? Which card should I discard to Inti? Or should I discard a card at all? The decisions in the Angels deck are much simpler. Should I cast the bigger angel in my hand or remove my opponent's biggest threat? Despite being advertised as standard decks and containing all standard legal cards, neither the Angels deck nor the Pirates deck would be remotely viable even at a casual standard Friday Night Magic. There is an upgrade path for the Angels deck to become something that might win some games at Friday Night Magic, and here's what you'd need to do. Let's begin by cutting green entirely. Yes, Llanowar Elves is a powerful card, but it doesn't fit this archetype. We're also cutting all the top-end cards from this deck, Exemplar of Light and Lyra Dawnbringer. The mana curve needs to be low to keep up with the speed of this format. Replace these top-end cards with cheaper cards that aren't angels, but are at least flying creatures. Momo, Friendly Flyer, and Clarion Conqueror. Pick up some Seam Rips and Sheltered by Ghosts. Removal spells that better fit the new low-to-the-ground game plan, rather than Ride's End and Split Up. Then, instead of your green lands, run 4 Abandoned Air Temple and 4 Soulstone Sanctuary. Lastly, you're going to need a sideboard of some kind. I'll include a link to the deck I'm describing in the description. Keep in mind, this is not some Tier 1 deck I'm providing you here. It's simply a deck list that could pick up a few wins at your local game store's Friday Night Magic, which, at the very least, is what these products should have been. As for the Pirates deck, you would essentially need to start over from scratch to have anything resembling a remotely viable deck, even just for Friday Night Magic. And honestly, even though you could play an Angels Flyers deck at Friday Night Magic to moderate results, I don't feel this product is well suited for that purpose. As Josh Lee Kwai would say, the juice is just not worth the squeeze. You're not saving any money spending $25 on this deck, as nearly all the most expensive cards in the deck would get cut in the process of upgrading it. All this begs the question, though, if these decks are not intended to be brought to standard Friday Night Magic, if they're only meant to be played against each other, why are they being advertised as standard decks? Why did they need to be standard legal at all? If they're casual products, then make them casual products, and then make them the best casual products they can be. Or if you wanted to make a product that encouraged new players to try out Standard, which to be clear, I think is a great goal, then why not make decks that could actually win a game or two at Friday Night Magic, or at least are within a few clear upgrades of winning a game or two at Friday Night Magic? Why not choose themes for these theme decks that have some kind of corollary to real Standard archetypes? +1/+1 counters versus burn, mice versus bats if you want to have creature types, something that actually gives players a real taste of what Standard is really like. Or, here's a novel idea, why not just make it so that players spend $25 to get both decks together in a single product? If they're designed to be battled against one another, why make players buy them separately? You could instead offer the 2 decks together in one product and call them something like, I don't know, versus decks, battle decks, something like that. I feel like I'm really close. Oh! These could have been dual decks, offered as a single product, with 2 casual decks meant to be played against one another, or these could have been challenger decks, designed to be bought and played right out of the box at Friday Night Magic, offering an excellent entry point for any players to play Standard, but in the end, they are neither, and they are not worth it to buy. Final conclusion? The Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks are pulled in too many directions. Lorwyn Eclipsed theme decks are not worth it for Friday Night Magic. They are also not worth it for financial value. These decks are only good for battling against each other, and they aren't even great at that. You have to buy them separately, and the matchup is very lopsided in the Angels deck's favor. Of the 2, the Angels deck has acceptable value, and as I said, is a bit more decent in gameplay, whereas the Pirates deck is simply abysmal. When you compare these decks to other 60-card precon decks, such as challenger decks or dual decks, the only grade you can be left with is an absolute fail. I hope this video has been of some help to you. Remember, we also took a look at whether or not it was worth it to buy a commander deck for Lorwyn Eclipsed, and we also played Lorwyn Eclipsed on our newest episode of Shuffle Up and Play. You'd help me out greatly just by watching either of those videos if you haven't already, and they are linked in this video's description or just by clicking the eye. And remember, regardless of what product or accessory you are buying, when it is possible and when it is reasonable to do so, try and spend that money where you spend time playing this great game, and that is at your local game store. You're supporting your Magic community when you do.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
What's up? It's Shuffle Up and Play with fans. We are playing with fan decks. Also, we're playing with a very special guest.
I'm Mark Rosewater. I'm the head designer for Magic the Gathering.
30 years, and you have not killed it yet.
I keep trying every year.
I know you do.
This goal of destroying Magic, Mark, you're not delivering, so.
And the angel's gonna hit.
Down to 6.
Down to 6.
Hey! Blood for the blood god.
Uh-oh. So the cynical loner is coming at Mark.
I will take 3 cynicism.
So we're doing a fair, logical attack here. Would you agree, Mr. Rosewater? This is logic. This is gameplay.
It's actually politics.
How is that